Yesterday I went down to London and I did a piece on the Jeremy Vine Show answering lots of gardeners' queries about the drought. We've got a massive drought here in the UK, very hot, and in a lot of the Northern Hemisphere, and many gardeners are getting quite worried. But first, I think the most important thing to remember is that if you can create and keep a lovely green microclimate around your house, even in drought conditions, it really does change the whole feel of your space. It is a much nicer space to live in. And however dry it gets, you can always grow things that love this sort of weather. So maybe you need to change your palette a bit, or maybe you need to change the way you garden a little bit, but never give up. Always think that you want a lovely green microclimate to make it so lovely to live in. I've just arrived at the Jeremy Vine Show and I'm doing a piece on irrigation. People have got so many problems on watering plants and plants dying, and apparently I'm going to take callers, live calls coming in from punters saying what do you do with your petunias, or how do I water my lawn, or what does a hose pipe ban mean, etc, etc. So it's most exciting. I've got to go into hair and makeup. I've probably overdone it already this morning, but she'll make me look much, much better, I hope. And we'll just see what they throw at me. So I'm with Carrie here and she's going to make me gorgeous.
You've done most of the hard work. I'm just going to add a little bit of eye, finesse the base, and a little bit of hair smoothing.
Lovely, I can't wait. All these cupboards of all this amazing stuff. You know, if you can't make me half decent with your skills and all this, it'll be disappointing. But I always thought they slathered it on for studio television, but you're not going to slather it.
HD TV.
Great, lovely, thank you very much. Let's get cracking.
Let's go, take a seat.
So I'm just about to the Jeremy Vine Show and I'm with these excellent guys here who do it all the time, and they have proper cameras, not my little phone, but anyway, it's all about what you do in your garden when it's a drought. Any questions? Likewise.
But I can't take a seat here.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then chili.
8, 7, 6.
3, 2, 1, and we're back.
Now before the break, we asked what was Abraham Lincoln a champion of in his country before he became president, and the answer is, well, it's not judo, it's wrestling.
But now I am joined by gardening expert Bunny Guinness, and it's time for Talking Gardening, the section of our show devoted to answering your questions. And today we're discussing how to garden during a heat wave. Outside our thankfully very nicely air-conditioned studio, the temperature is scorchingly hot, and the battle through another heat wave has just begun. There are warnings of droughts and wildfires, and so how do you take care of your garden in extreme heat? Maybe you're worried about your lawn in a hosepipe ban, or you're looking for your plants that can thrive in these hot weather conditions. So any questions you have, now is your chance. Bunny's going to do her best to answer all of them. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. So, Bunny, the dryness, the extreme heat, what effect is that having on people's gardens?
I think primarily it's the lawns, isn't it? Because whereas you've got plants that have been in for some time and they've got their roots down, the lawns, which are usually beautifully green, and we really are a bit innate, a bit strange about our lawns, aren't we? We really love them, we tend them, and they've all gone a bit like the Serengeti. And then you think, well, should we be piling on the water to keep them green? Because it does make the whole garden look nice, and it is very tempting to do that. But you know, if you put on lots of water, you imagine that sprinklers going over the garden, and in 1 hour, that will put on the same amount of water as a family of 4 will use in a whole week. So it's a bit extravagant. There's a lot of water, and a lot of it, if it's done in the heat of the day, will be evaporating up and going back up to the sky.
If you've decided, you know what, I'm going to leave it, okay? I'm not going to waste all that water right now, particularly if we're going to be heading into hosepipe bans, but already millions of people are already in, but 15 million more perhaps, if Thames Water announced one. What happens to the grass? Is it gone forever, or will it come back when the rain season starts?
I don't think I've ever seen a lawn in this country which has gone dry and not recovered.
Right.
So I think we can all rest assured about that. And I'm in the driest part of the country. I'm in East Midlands, and the village up the road is technically a desert some years with the amount of rainfall. So I think we can rest assured about that. But what you can do is for future years, or to start with, you cut it higher. I mean, nobody will be cutting them now because there's nothing to cut. But in future years, you cut it a bit higher, and that helps it. And I always think what they do at Highgrove, Prince Charles, I did a book with him on his garden, and he has mown green spaces, he calls them. He doesn't call them lawns, he calls them mown green spaces. And he encourages things like the thymes, the self-heals, the clovers to come in, and those all stay a lot greener, and so they look lovely. They're not those beautiful fine turfs that you have in croquet lawns and things, but does it matter? You know, they're much better for insects, they're better for butterflies. They will live in that sort of longer turf with lots of variable plants in them. So I think that's one good way. And I also have mulch mower or a mower, a robotic mower, and the robotic mowers just cut it every day when it's not a drought, and it all goes back onto the soil.
And we can see you looking after, doing some.
What am I doing?
What shape are you going for there, Bonnie?
That's a bird. That's a big plump bird, and those are my yew hedges. Yeah, so I've got a lot of structure in my garden. So I've got a lot of hedges there. I'm making a new rose meadow, which has now been transformed into a rose meadow. But I'm very hands-on. I do most of the garden myself. I have Dave that helps me 1 day a week. I have a lot of structure in the garden, so when the lawns are like the Serengeti, you don't notice so much. So I've got my green yew hedges, which I don't think any amount of drought would kill, and box plants and things like that. What am I doing there?
Now, let's look at if you are in an area where there is a hosepipe ban.
Yeah.
What should you be prioritising? We've kind of, I think we've got to the conclusion. Leave the lawn as it is. It will come back when the rain comes back.
Yeah.
But when you have to water whatever else is left, what do you prioritise?
Well, I think anything you planted in the last 18 months or so. I mean, basically, I think the best thing you can do is there's that old Chinese proverb, the shadow of the gardener is the best fertiliser. And what that means is you just look and you watch your plants, and they will quickly tell you if they're feeling dry, and their leaves will go slightly woody. I've got a hydrangea that's been in for maybe 25 years, and it's as tall as this room, but suddenly, last week, it started to look very limp. So I did put a can of water on that, and it perked itself up. So just watch them and see what's needed, but pot plants, obviously. But I have 80 pot plants, and I maybe spend half an hour watering them a week, and I cut the bases out of the pots. I've got a terracotta pot, so I'll have a disc cutter, and I'll cut the bases out, and I put them on soil. So even if they look like they're on paving, I've actually removed the paving underneath, and they're on soil. Right. So I've got plants in pots that I've never watered, never fertilised after the first 6 months.
Because they've found
they've
water.
Gone down, and so I've got big, sort of small multi-stem trees, I've got topiary, all sorts of things. And I think that's a fab tip. And I've done a YouTube video on that, and it just shows you, with timber tubs or metal tubs, terracotta tubs, plastic, whatever, you can do it. And then what I love about having plants in pots is it elevates them and it makes them look more special.
What do you do about this is a personal question, because in our garden we've got a couple of acers and they're really struggling.
Yeah.
Their leaves are shriveling up. We're watering them. They sort of look as if they're recovered, but the following day again they'll shrivel up. What can you do with sort of trees, things that are not in pots?
So yours are in the ground, and I think what you're doing is you're not watering them. I think you're watering them too frequently and not enough. So I always remember a guy, irrigation specialist, said in Crete, they sowed their French beans and they flooded the field before they sowed them. And then they sowed them and they didn't water them again. And the reason is the roots just chase the water down as it goes through the soil. You've been just splashing the water on the top. And so their roots of your acers have come up to the surface, and then they will suffer. They need to get down. So go out with maybe a 2-gallon can once a week, maybe two 2-gallon cans to start with. Put it on right by the roots in the evening, preferably, so it can percolate through and it doesn't evaporate off. And then they should perk up, and if not, give them a bit more.
That's also a good tip. You've mentioned it twice now, that if you're watering during the day, a lot of that water is going to evaporate, particularly with these temperatures. So watering after, when it's sort of dust time and it's not too hot, is actually going to be more efficient.
I think so, unless you've got a plant that gets mildew. And so sometimes if you're in a sort of more humid part of the country, then some people like to water them in the earlier part, because then it evaporates and they don't get mildew and fungal diseases.
We're getting some questions in. Now's your time to give us a shout. 020 7862 2222 if you have any questions and you get them answered right now. Let's head over to your social media platforms. Liam's tweeted, and he's asking this: is it okay to just leave the lawn as it is? I'm hoping as soon as the rain returns, so will the green grass. I think we've answered that.
Definitely, Liam.
Yes.
Leave it. Enjoy the sunshine.
Enjoy that. Let's move on to another one. Tasha has written, it's survival of the fittest in my garden. Last year I did use the hosepipe when I could, but it's such a faff for me. Most of my plants are doing fine. But what is most at risk and how can I look after them?
Well, you've just got to look and see when their leaves start to droop, really. But I mean, things like you mentioned, acers, roses can sometimes need it if they haven't been in so long, but it's mainly those recently planted plants that will not have the root system below, and they need that extra care.
Okay, I believe we have a keen gardener among us here.
Oh,
Christo is gagging to ask a question. Christo, take it away.
So many questions. Now, I've got lots of hanging baskets. I've got about 30 pots in my garden. They're not in
Look
the
at
soil.
that garden. It's beautiful.
On the right-hand side, actually, was where the lawn was. But I had just had the lawn taken out and I made it into a raised bed in the end, actually, because the lawn kept going brown. But in most of my pots and my baskets, I've got petunias. Now, what can I do to stop my petunias roasting? Because even when I'm watering them often, the leaves are going horrible manky colours, they're drying up, I have to deadhead them constantly. Or am I onto a loser in this weather with petunias? Should I go for something else in bath?
In previous years, you see, I would have said you'll be absolutely fine. But do you know what? Because of the new regulations with peat compost, I bet the compost you put those petunias in is peat-free. Is that right? Or don't you know?
I think it is, yeah.
And that to substitute the coir and things does not hold water the same way like peat. And I've had so many people come up to me when I've done talks and stuff saying, this new peat-free compost, I can't get anything alive, because you need to water it much, much more frequently. So if you're going to use a peat-free compost and you agree with the ban, and I have to say it's not yet a done deal, and I have done a YouTube video on it, and there's lots of arguments for keeping peat going. This is from a professor who studied peat all his life. So I would either get much bigger pots to compensate for the fact that you're using a compost that does not retain water so well, and then I think you might be onto a winner. But I often put my pots on capillary matting, but it doesn't look so nice. But, you know, if you have capillary matting in your greenhouse, it's sort of black stuff usually, and it will absorb it's like 9 gallons per square metre. And so I use it in my greenhouse, and you put a plant on that, and it sucks it up from this wick. And so that distributes it when the plant needs it throughout the day. So that saves me hours
Really
as well.
interesting that the peat being banned is actually less environmentally friendly for the amount of water you've got to use.
Because you've also got to add more fertiliser, don't forget. Because you're watering more often, the fertiliser's leaching out. And where the coir comes from in Sri Lanka and places, they have to wash it massively with clean water to get the salt out. So it's not very environmentally friendly.
Thank you.
We're getting quite a few calls coming in, and now Bunny. So Valerie's called from North Yorkshire. Valerie, welcome to the show. What would you like to ask?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, Bunny.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. My question is, in November last year, I planted 6 specimen Betula jackmontii trees, and they're 15, 18 feet tall. Ooh. And they're beautiful. Well, they were beautiful, but they are now starting to lose their leaves. I have mulched around them, and I have been watering them until I've just heard that Yorkshire Water are now going to put a hosepipe ban on, and I'm really worried about what were expensive trees.
Yeah.
What to do, really.
So were they in containers when you planted them, or were they root board or bare root?
They were bare root.
Bare root. I mean, the thing is, birch and oak are and beech are 3 of the most difficult plants to transplant at a larger size. Okay, so you have got a bit of a battle there. But I think, even if you've got a hose pipe plan, you've got a watering can, haven't you? So
I do.
You do. So what I do, and when you're using watering cans, you know, if you're lugging heavy cans about, and you can see from my arms, I do a fair amount of this. It's always better to have 2 cans, so your body is balanced, so you're not ending up with a sort of crick back and a crick neck. And so take 2 cans, and in the evening, I would soak them probably twice a week if they're starting to look a bit crispy on the edges. And if you've got any shade netting, you know, if you can reduce the transpiration from their leaves, so have you got, you know, like onion sacks wouldn't be big enough, but you can buy green shade netting or black shade netting from garden centres, and that will reduce the transpiration, plunge on the water, and even if they lose all their leaves, sometimes you find they come back when the rains come.
Valerie, thank you for calling us. I can just tell you that it has just been announced that a drought has been announced in southern, central and eastern England. Is that bad news for gardeners?
Well, we've got to learn. This is going to happen year in year, isn't it? We'll get the odd wet year, but we've got to move with the times, and we've just got to... I mean, gardeners are savvy, aren't we? Everything is thrown at us, and we get used to accommodate it. We all just grow different plants. I mean, I'm growing cork oaks now in lots of places, in other people's gardens, and you know, Quercus used for putting corks in wine bottles and things, or used to, and it's thriving. You know, we're going to change the palette, and plants that we plant or trees that we plant this year will actually be thriving in 50 years when the climate's going to be so much warmer. So we've got to think what we plant and plant the right things.
Okay, let's squeeze that one more call in. Christine's call from Leicestershire. Christine, what's your question?
Yes, I have a shower over the bath. So when I shower, I put the plug in the bath, and I'm left with my shower water. I use more natural cosmetics. I don't use the high perfumed soaps and stuff. I use Faith in Nature shampoo and a gentle toilet soap for my body. Will that, if I use that shower water, will it harm?
No, that's a brilliant question, and everybody who's a gardener should put a diverter on their downpipe to save you scraping it out of the bath, which is pretty difficult, isn't it? So put a diverter, you can buy them for about 20 quid, on the downpipe, put it into a water butt, and then take it out with a can or whatever. But it's a really good point, because you do use a lot of water like that, and you, as long as you don't slather yourself in these chemicals and you use them moderately, you're absolutely fine.
Any sort of shower gels or things that you might use are going to be okay? They're not going to harm
generally,
the
unless you're going bonkers. You know, you see some YouTube videos and they put like 15 different products on the hair, and you think, what? But you can generally, I mean, I think washing machine water for clothes, I don't like so much. I think that is a bit more, you know, But otherwise, I think everybody...
Bath, shower water, if you're using just one simple soap, you can use that. It's not going to harm your plants.
No.
Well, that's great. Great news. Thank you, Christine. Thanks for your call. And Bunny, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and such great, useful advice. Thank you for all your calls and questions as well. We're going to move on now. Later, we're going to be asking you this: which city do you think should host Eurovision? But after the break, are profits made by energy companies dirty and evil? What do you think?
So I hope that answers a few of your queries. Now, there were things that I did not mention. Firstly, what I've done here more than anything, which really helps in droughts, is every autumn and winter I absolutely pile on the mulch onto my borders, because I've got a very thin soil, and a thin soil does not hold the water. But when you add organic matter to it, then you get lots of humus, and then it retains the moisture much better, and the plants do so much better. I use ramiel, which I get free from the tree surgeon, which is basically branches 70 mil in diameter or less, and they get it when they do tree surgery work. It often includes leaves and small branches. They shred it all up, and then they bring a lorry load, which I pile up here, and then I use after 3 months, and it goes all over the veg and the borders. Whatever form of organic matter you can get cheaply or free, compost, whatever, make sure you go for that. It's always worth using. The next point is with veg. Some veg need a lot more watering than others, and leafy veg like lettuce and basil and things like that really do like regular watering. So make sure you give them priority over your root crops. And lots of root crops, if you give them too much water, you will just get masses of top growth and little bottom growth. And it's the bottom growth, the roots, that you really want. And also you need to be fairly even-handed with your watering when you're watering roots. We get a lot of questions on Gardeners' Question Times when their carrots split or fork. And this is often because they have deluges of water, droughts, deluges of water and droughts. And that is often a cause of splitting and cracking and forking. And then the final point that I have in my garden, everywhere, I've got barrels, I've got butts, I've got canisters that I just store all the way around the place, because I do like watering from the can. I do use a hose. Obviously, if there's a hose pipe ban, people can't use a hose, but I do like to use a can. And I often fill my can with the hose. Some of them are at the bottom of a downpipe, so they catch the water from the roofs and things, but a lot of them are just against house walls or whatever. And when there's a hose pipe ban, you cannot fill them with a hose pipe. So it's just so much quicker to fill the can from the butt and put it on the plant, whereas if you have to put it underneath the tap, wait for it to fill, the job takes 3 times as long. So have a look at this one, it's fabulous. But I hope that's a few tips for you to help you with your garden and watering.